Hey everybody, I'm Rob. This is Dashboard. And in this video, I'm going to talk about a new device we're going to offer that will allow owners of our older benches, meaning any of multiple generations of benches that have plywood tops like this one, and who are using our side mount fences from the earlier generations, to alter these tops so that they're the same as the Gen 2 bench, which will allow you then to use our newer surface mount fences and newer guide rail brackets to the best effect, so that you will get the simplicity of a surface mount fence and added capacity for crosscuts with the Gen 2 guide rail brackets. So let's get into it. Now, when I say adding new holes to your existing top, I'm referring to this row of holes that you see along the extreme back edge of the top. Now, of course, on the Gen 2 benches, we have a whole ton of them, probably more than we need, but never let it be said that we didn't provide options. Realistically, you probably only need 4 for your older bench because the fences only have 2 fence blocks each. So it's just a question of picking where you want to put them. Okay, so here's what we have. It's a simple router template that you will use with a pair of our short bench dogs and a pilot bit in your router, preferably a very new sharp one. So there are 3 smaller holes and 2 bigger holes. The 2 bigger holes are for the bench dogs. The 3 smaller holes are the ones you're going to create in your bench top. So let's say I want to put a new hole right here. So all I need to do, move the template over these existing holes, pop the dogs in. It is a snug fit on purpose. Push them down so they're below the surface, and then we're ready to go. So you should drill a pilot hole here, maybe a 1/4 inch, because the pattern bit's not really a plunge bit. And it will fight with that material because it doesn't have cutters that go all the way to the center. So if you can just make a starter hole, everything's going to be a lot nicer. In some cases, you might want to do up to 1/2 inch size so that this 1/2 inch bit would just fit right through it, and you could start no problem. Make sure, of course, that your depth setting is correct so you don't cut the template with the router bit, and move slowly and carefully and make sure you go around and get it nice and clean. And then you're ready to move on to the next location. You just pop this off, and sometimes the dogs will come with it and sometimes they won't, but then you're ready to move. Now, you can see that this hole is centered between the dog holes. This one is not, and this one also is not. This one is just for the shortcut. This one is for a couple of special locations, and I'll talk about those next. Okay, so for this first hole, let's just start by recognizing that the guide rail is going to be here, and I'm using this Makita rail. Could be a Festool rail or Milwaukee or PowerTech, whatever, just because it's the wider of the rail types. If you had a Bosch or Mafell rail, it's only about this wide. You could get away with a different location, but I think it's better to just say, we're going to do this first hole based on the widest rail. So if I were just centering between these two, I were here, and the fence block is getting pretty close to the rail, uncomfortably close. And so that also means that the end of the fence would be uncomfortably close to the rail. So we're going to offset that this way a little bit. So let's just move this. So now if we look at it the way I showed before, if I just use this hole that makes a new hole centered between the existing holes, that is going to be too close. So I'm going to use this hole. If I just turn it around, of course, it goes in the opposite direction. But if I turn it around and flip it over, it goes back where we want it. So this is going to go here. This is going to go here. Now you have your hole where you want it. So do that one, and we'll move on. Okay, so we're all set to make the first hole. And I'm going to put it in the offset position over here so I have plenty of room between the fence block and the rail. So in preparation for that, let's consider that right here is the leg lock. It's attached underneath the top. So you better take a look at how that is positioned from underneath before you decide to go drilling through here, because you might run into it and then you'd be very unhappy. All right, here we are underneath. And look, leg lock is perpendicular to the holes. It might even have been this way, which could have caused a problem. So let's just make sure it's parallel to the holes this way, and then we have no interference. All right, so let's make the first hole. Remember, I'm going to offset it this way by going like that. Turn the jig over. Set this in. And now I know where I'm going to drill the hole, just in the center of there. Okay, now we'll get the router. Okay, got the router. I've set the depth, hanging it over the hole here, and we're ready to go. And look, there's our nice new hole. Fence block goes right in. Tighten that in place, and we're halfway home. Let's make some more holes. This time I'll start by putting the dogs in the hole first. Pop that on there. Another beauty. Works great. In and out. One more. All right, so we have our first fence block location, and now we need the second hole. So you could simply choose to center that hole between the first and second rows here. However, if you want to get a little more separation between the fence blocks, I know I said this hole was only for shortcuts, but just between you and me, you can do it this way too. This one's going to go here, like that, and you get a hole here. So you have a little more space between them if that makes you feel better. But otherwise, simply centering them like we would any others here would be just fine with me. So we have 3 out of 4 holes. I still need a second hole for the long fence. So I made this hole here. This fence block will go there. Now, of course, since the fence blocks move around wherever you like them, the location is up to you. I usually like to sort of divide it into 60-40 or so. I mean, it really depends on what you want. Maybe running that a little bit farther. Doesn't matter where you put it, it's up to you. But remember, watch out for where the stretchers are, because they go all the way to the frame, and you do not want to plunge into one of those. So make sure you look underneath, check where the stretchers are before you decide where you want to put one of these holes, then follow the procedure you've already seen, and you'll be all set. Okay, fence goes in. And for you detail-oriented types, we'll just check the square. No tilt, no gaps. Looks like we're in business. Now let's do the shortcut. Okay, here we are with the contemporary shortcut. And I'll just talk about where the holes are located on this top to give you some reference for what you're going to do. Now on this end, we have an offset hole between these two, just on this side of the cut strip, then one that is in line with the last row. That's the best bet for this end of the shortcut. On the main section, the first one should be between the second and third holes to this side of the cut strip. That can just be centered. Thereafter, everything else can be centered. except this last row. You are not going to be able to make this last hole because the spacing between these last two rows is not 96 millimeters on center. We did that because the leg is right under here. And we did not want to put a row of holes directly on top of a leg, which would make inserting things there that were thicker than the benchtop impossible. That's why there's a greater spacing here. It really doesn't affect anything. Just that using the jig, you're not going to be able to make this hole. So let's get started. All right, for this section of the video, I'm using a somewhat newer version of the template, closer to production version. And the only difference is that it has some text here. So I want this hole to be offset between these two. And if I place it like I've done on most of the holes on the big bench, well, it's centered, so that I don't want that. I just want to turn this around, and you can see where it's going to go. Okay, so put these guys in here, pop the template on, and I will drill a pilot hole to get this started. And now let's get the router. All right, so just like I did on the big bench, I'm going to put the second hole right in line with this row here. So again, super simple. Pop that on like that, drill, route, and you're in business. Okay, here we are on the main body of the top. I'm just going to center my first hole between second and third row. Pop those in, pop that in, drill and route. All right, just to clarify, I'm making this hole centered between the second and third row. Here's the fence block. So if you're using a Bosch or Mafell rail, which is narrow, here we are in the setup position, you'll notice there's plenty of room here. The fence block does not interfere with the rail. However, if you're using a Festool style rail, which is considerably wider, what happens? It's right there, okay? So don't do that centered hole between the second and third row if you intend to use a wider rail. In that case, center the hole between the third and fourth row over here. The fence is plenty rigid. It's not going to bend because there's not a block any closer to the cut line than that. But this will keep you safe, give you plenty of room to raise and lower the rail without any concern about ever bumping into a fence block or hitting it with your saw. So now I'm going to do the last of the 4 holes. So if you remember from earlier, I cannot put one between the last row and the next to last row because of the hole spacing. So it's going to go here. You could choose to go centered, or you could choose to go a little farther, put it off center. And just for the sake of argument, I'm going to show that. Now, here we have a centered hole. It's going to put it right in the middle. How do I get it offset? Just like before on the bigger bench. I'm going to turn this around and flip it over. So that's where the hole is going to be. Let's do it. Okay, one final clarification about hole location. I mentioned that if you use a narrower rail on the shortcut, you can center the hole between the second and third row. And if you want a wider rail, you'll center it between the third and fourth row. On the big bench, I did make this hole offset between the second and third row. Don't do that on the shortcut because there's a frame stretcher under here, piece of aluminum. You will run into that if you do it, just to clarify. So now I have 3 holes along the back here that I can use to mount the F2. So let's just do that. And I'm choosing this one that's farther away from the cut strip just because I am going to use a Festool style rail. I'm in this example. So there are new surface mount fences installed on a vintage shortcut. And this will apply to all shortcuts that have a full row of holes on this end. There were some early models that only had the slotted holes here. They did not have a row at the very end. Those we probably can't retrofit, but that's a small minority of benches that we produced, and it was quite a long time ago. So now we can use the surface mount fences in combination with the newer guide rail brackets and still get more crosscut capacity than you could before with older brackets and side mounted fences. You have 2 holes in the fence blocks where you can mount the expand dogs. One of them lets you put it farther back than the other. So that's detailed in the fence video. Now, with all the new components, you will have crosscut capacity of 25.5 inches. You can use your Gen 1 F2 in the same group of holes, and you'll actually get more crosscut capacity because it was a bit shallower front to back. Now, this is the template you've seen me use. This is not what we're producing. We're producing this. Actually, looks kind of cool. Different colors. Same thing as the gray one, just looks nicer. So you're all set. Thanks for watching.